So as introduced, this is a study with MEDI0382. It's a balanced GLP-1 and glucagon dual agonist. The main data is in poster 743, as already alluded to. It's been published in the Lancet as well. So I'm just briefly going over an exploratory analysis based on looking at incretin, the changes of the compound on incretin hormones. Just briefly to recap, we enrolled patients on metformin monotherapy with type 2 diabetes and took them through 41 days of treatment with a short up titration at the beginning. 2 smaller doses, then leading up to 200 microgram for the rest of the study. We enrolled in total 51 patients, and I think in the demographics, I think the main thing to point out is we had a BMI around 32, 33, and an HbA1c around 7.2 or 7.3. Relatively well-controlled patients, typical maybe of my compatriots, compliance with their medication. So. The first kind of data point we wanted to point out is the glucose lowering. This is also on the other posters on this study. So we gave patients an Ensure plus milkshake and then followed their glucose excursion over 240 minutes. You see in dotted line the baseline, so very similar. You're kind of starting above the baseline level for fasting plasma glucose and then following up the digestion of the meal over 90 minutes. You see that at the end of the study, after 41 days, we saw a very significant reduction in fasting plasma glucose, as well as a significant reduction in the postprandial peak, leading overall to a significant reduction in the area under the curve of glucose. So then we were obviously interested to understand what is happening with other incretin hormones to explain that particular result. First thing we looked at was the fasting insulin levels. Now, longer-acting GLP-1s, such as liraglutide, have been described as insulinotropic agents, and very much in line with this, we see an increase of fasting insulin over time over the course of the study, over placebo. Now, in terms of the insulin response during the mixed meal test, we were surprised to see that there wasn't actually any change, even though we saw this significant reduction in glucose. Insulin during the mixed meal test seems to not change at all between the baseline and 41 weeks. There was a small shift in the insulin response, in the peak of the insulin response that we observed. It's not quite reflected in the C-peptide. If you want to see it, you may see it, which may be indicative of a shift in, the shift might be indicative of a gastric emptying delay, which is more associated with the short-acting GLP-1 agonists, such as lixisenatide and exenatide. But I'll come back to this when we talk about the GIP data. Now we then measured glucagon as one of the gut-derived hormones, and the GLP-1s have been very well described to suppress glucagon, and that's what we see. We see both a significant increase from baseline in percentage glucagon AUC, as well as a reduction in the fasting glucagon levels, very much in line with what has been reported for longer-acting GLP-1s as well. Now looking at GLP-1s, there's a bit of mixed data around. People have not quite consistently observed the same effects. What we are seeing clearly a significant decrease from baseline in total GLP-1, as well as a significant decrease in baseline fasting GLP-1 after the 41 days of treatment, with obviously this curve very much sticking out. And then finally we looked at GIP, the glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide. Now again, there's very mixed data out there. Some reports that that GLP-1 treatment increases GIP. What we are very clearly seeing is we have a very significant decrease from baseline in percentage GIP AUC, as well as a small decrease in baseline. But I think in this case now, with repeated assays, we always saw the shift in the delay of the peak. Again, I think this time much more strongly suggesting that we have a change in gastric emptying time, a slowing gastric emptying time, more associated with, typically associated with short-acting GLP-1 agonists. So in total, we explain this particular very strong glucose effect with both having insulinotropic effects, like a longer-acting GLP-1, as well as a potential gastric emptying delay, more typical to a short-acting GLP-1. And the effects on GIP might be something unique that at least hasn't been described in this form with a GLP-1 monoagonist. Thank you for your time.